1066 to 1485. 1066. Harold II is crowned king the day after Edward the Confessor dies. Tostig and Harald Hardrada of Norway invade England. Harold defeats them at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, killing both. Battle of Hastings. 19 days after Battle of Stamford Bridge, William of Normandy lands at Pevensey, defeats and kills Harold. William I, the Conqueror, first Norman King of England, to 1087. 1067, work is begun on building the Tower of London. 1068, the Norman Conquest continues until 1069, William subdues the north of England. The harrying of the north, the region is laid waste. 1070, Harold the Wake begins a Saxon revolt in the fens of eastern England. Lanfranc, an Italian lawyer, becomes William's formidable Archbishop of Canterbury. Lanfranc rebuilds Canterbury Cathedral and establishes the primacy of the See of Canterbury over York, but does not enforce clerical celibacy. 1072, William invades Scotland, and also receives the submission of Harold the Wake. 1080, William, in a letter, reminds the Bishop of Rome that the King of England owes him no allegiance. 1086, Domesday Book is completed in England. 1087, William II, Rufus, King of England, to 1100, his elder brother, Robert, is Duke of Normandy. 1093, Donald Bain, King of Scots, to 1097. Following the death of his brother, Malcolm III, in battle against the English. 1097, Edgar, second son of Malcolm Canmore, King of Scotland, to 1107, he defeats Donald Bain with the assistance of William II of England. 1099, Crusaders capture Jerusalem. Godfrey of Bouillon is elected King of Jerusalem. 1100, Henry I, youngest son of William the Conqueror, King of England, to 1135, following assassination of William Rufus. 1106, Henry I defeats his brother Robert, Duke of Normandy, at Battle of Tinchebrai. Robert remains captive for life. 1113, founding of the Order of St. John is formally acknowledged by the papacy. 1114, Matilda, Maud, daughter of Henry I of England marries Emperor Henry V. 1118, Hugues de Payens founds the Order of Knights of Templars. 1120, William, heir of Henry I of England, is drowned in wreck of the White Ship. 1129, Empress Matilda, widow of Henry V, marries Geoffrey the Handsome, Count of Anjou, nicknamed Plantagenet. 1139, Matilda lands in England. 1141, Matilda captures Stephen at the Battle of Lincoln, and reigns disastrously as queen. She is driven out by a popular rising and Stephen restored. 1148, Matilda leaves England for the last time. 1152, marriage of Louis VII of France and Eleanor of Aquitaine is annulled on grounds of blood relationship. Eleanor marries Henry of Anjou, allying Aquitaine to his lands of Anjou and Normandy, 2 months after her divorce. 1153, Henry of Anjou, son of Matilda, invades England and forces Stephen to make him heir to the English throne. 1154, Henry II, King of England, to 1189, he also rules more than half of France. Pope Adrian IV, to 1159, Nicholas Breakspear, the only English pope. 1155, Henry II appoints the Archdeacon of Canterbury, Thomas à Becket, as Chancellor. 1159, Henry II levies scutage, payment in cash instead of military service. 1162, Becket is appointed Archbishop of Canterbury and at once quarrels with Henry II over the Church's rights. 1164, Constitutions of Clarendon, Restatement of laws governing trial of ecclesiastics in England. Becket is forced to flee to France. 1170. Becket is reconciled with Henry II, returns to Canterbury, is murdered by 4 knights after Henry's hasty words against him. 1173. Rebellion of Henry's eldest sons, Henry, Richard, and Geoffrey, supported by their mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Thomas à Becket canonized. 1189. Richard I, Coeur de Lion, eldest surviving son of Henry II, King of England, to 1199. 1191. The bodies of King Arthur and Guinevere were reported to have been exhumed from a grave at Glastonbury Abbey. Richard I conquers Cyprus and captures the city of Acre. 1192. Richard I captures Jaffa, makes peace with Saladin. On the way home he is captured by his enemy, Duke Leopold of Austria. 1193. Leopold hands Richard over to Emperor Henry VI, who demands ransom. 1194. Richard is ransomed and returned to England. 1199. John Lackland, youngest son of Henry II, King of England, to 1216. 1203. John of England orders the murder of his nephew Arthur, Duke of Brittany. 1207. Pope Innocent III appoints Stephen Langton Archbishop of Canterbury. Langton is the man who divided the books of the Bible into chapters. John refuses to let him take office. 1208. Innocent III lays England under interdict. 1209. Cambridge University is founded in England. Innocent III excommunicates John for attacks on church property. 1213. Innocent III declares John deposed. John resigns his kingship to the Pope and receives it back as a holding from the Roman legate, thereby ending the interdict. 1215. Signing of Magna Carta. English barons forced John to agree to a statement of their rights. 1216. Henry III becomes King of England at age 9, to 1272. 1227. Henry III begins personal rule in England. 1256. Prince Llewellyn sweeps English from Wales. 1264. Simon de Montfort and other English barons defeat Henry III at Battle of Lewes. 1265. De Montfort's Parliament. Burgesses from major towns summoned to Parliament for the first time. Henry III's son Edward defeats and kills Simon de Montfort at Battle of Evesham. 1269. Rebuilding of Westminster Abbey begun by Henry III. 1272. Edward I, King of England, to 1307. 1283. Edward I defeats and kills Llewellyn, Prince of Wales, and executes Llewellyn's brother David. Conquest of Wales complete. 1290. Edward I expels all Jews from England. 1291. Scots acknowledge Edward I of England as suzerain. He arbitrates in succession dispute. 1295. Model Parliament of Edward I. Knights and burgesses from English shires and towns summoned. First Representative Parliament. 1296. Edward I of England deposes John Balliol from Scottish throne. 1297. Battle of Cambuskenneth. Scottish patriot William Wallace defeats English army. 1298. Edward I defeats Wallace at Battle of Falkirk and reconquers Scotland. 1301. Edward I of England invests his baby son Edward as Prince of Wales. 1305. The English capture and execute William Wallace. 1306. New Scottish rebellion against English rule led by Robert Bruce. Robert I, the Bruce crowned King of Scotland, to 1329, at Scone 1307, Edward I dies on march north to crush Robert Bruce. Edward II, King of England, to 1327, 1310, English barons appoint 21 peers, the Lords Ordainers, to manage Edward II's household, 1312, Order of Knights Templar abolished, 1314, Battle of Bannockburn, Robert Bruce defeats Edward II and makes Scotland independent, 1326, Queen Isabella and Roger Mortimer sail from France with an army to rebel against Edward II of England, 1327, Parliament declares Edward II deposed, and his son acceds to the throne as Edward III. Edward II is hideously murdered. 9 months later, 1328, Charles IV dies, ending the Capetian dynasty. Philip of Valois succeeds him as Philip V. 1329, Edward III of England does simple homage for Aquitaine, Guyenne, but refuses to do liege homage. 1333, Edward III invades Scotland on Balliol's behalf and defeats the Scots at Battle of Halligan Hill. 1336, Edward places an embargo on English exports of wool to Flanders. 1337, Philip declares Edward's fiefs forfeit and begins harassing the frontiers of Aquitaine. Edward III, provoked by these attacks on his territories in France, declares himself King of France. The 100 Years' War begins, ends 1453, 1338, Treaty of Coblentz, alliance between England and the Holy Roman Empire. Edward III formally claims the French crown. 1340, naval victory at Sluys gives England the command of the English Channel. English Parliament passes 4 statutes providing that taxation shall be imposed only by Parliament. 1346, Edward III of England invades France with a large army and defeats an even bigger army under Philip V at the Battle of Crécy. 1347, the English capture Calais. 1348, Edward III establishes the Order of the Garter. Black Death, bubonic plague, reaches England. 1351, the English remove the Pope's power to give English benefices to foreigners. 1353, Statute of Praemunire, English Parliament forbids appeals to Pope. 1356, Edward the Black Prince, son of Edward III, defeats the French at the Battle of Poitiers, capturing King John II. 1358, the Jack Erie. 1360, Peace of Brittany ends the first stage of the 100 Years' War. Edward III gives up claim to French throne. 1369, second stage of war between England and France begins. 1370, French troops commanded by Bertrand d'Uxclin, Edward, the Black Prince, sacks Limoges. 1372, French troops recapture Poitou and Brittany, naval battle of La Rochelle, French regain control of English Channel. 1373, John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, son of Edward III, leads new English invasion of France. 1374, John of Gaunt returns to England and takes charge of the government. Edward III in his dotage, the Black Prince is ill. 1375, Truce of Bruges ends hostilities between England and France. 1376, the Good Parliament in England, called by Edward the Black Prince, introduces many reforms of government. Death of Edward the Black Prince, aged 45, the civil dominion of John Wycliffe, an Oxford Don, calling for church reforms. 1377, Richard II, son of the Black Prince, King of England, to 1399, 1381, peasants' revolt in England. John Wycliffe, an Oxford theologian, publishes his confession, denying that the substance of bread and wine are miraculously changed during the Eucharist. 1382, John Wycliffe is expelled from Oxford because of his opposition to certain church doctrines. 1386, John of Gaunt leads an expedition to Castile, which he claims in his wife's name, fails. 1388, 1387, Geoffrey Chaucer begins work on the Canterbury Tales. 1389, Richard II, aged 22, assumes power. 1394, Richard II leads expedition to subdue Ireland, returns to England. 1395, 1396, Richard II marries the 7-year-old Princess Isabella of France. 1399, death of John of Gaunt, Gaunt's eldest son, Henry of Bolingbroke, lands in Yorkshire with 40 followers, and soon has 60,000 supporters. Richard II is deposed, Bolingbroke becomes Henry IV, King of England, to 1413, 1400, Richard II murdered at Pontefract Castle. Owen Glendower proclaims himself Prince of Wales and begins rebellion. 1401, persecution of Lollards for revolting against clergy. 1402, Henry IV enters Wales in pursuit of Glendower. 1403, Battle of Shrewsbury, rebellion by the Percy family, Henry IV defeats and kills Harry Hotspur Percy. 1406, Henry, Prince of Wales, defeats Welsh. 1413, Henry V, King of England, to 1422. 1415, Henry V invades France, and defeats the French at Agincourt. 1416, death of Owen Glendower. 1420, Treaty of Droz. 1422, deaths of Henry V of England and Charles VI of France. Henry V, King of England, to 1461. 1424, John, Duke of Bedford, regent for Henry VI of England, defeats the French at Cravant. 1428, Henry V begins siege of Orleans. 1429, a French force, led by military commander Joan of Arc, Jeanne d'Arc, relieves the siege of Orleans. Charles VII crowned King of France at Rheims. 1430, Burgundians capture Jeanne d'Arc and hand her over to the English. 1431, Jeanne d'Arc burned as a witch at Rouen. Henry VI of England crowned King of France in Paris. 1453, Bordeaux falls to the French. 100 Years' War ends. England's only French possession is Calais. In England, Henry V becomes insane. 1454, Richard, Duke of York, is regent of England while Henry V is insane. Printing with movable type is perfected in Germany by Johannes Gutenberg. 1455, Henry V recovers. Richard of York is replaced by Somerset and excluded from the Royal Council. War of the Roses, civil wars in England between royal houses of York and Lancaster, until 1485. Battle of St. Albans. Somerset defeated and killed. 1460, Battle of Wakefield. Richard of York is defeated and killed. Earl of Warwick, the Kingmaker, captures London for the Yorkists. Battle of Northampton, Henry V is captured by Yorkists. 1461, Battles of Mortimer's Cross and Towton. Richard's son, Edward of York, defeats Lancastrians and becomes king. Edward IV, King of England, to 1483. 1465, Henry V imprisoned by Edward IV. 1466, Warwick's quarrels with Edward IV